Afternoon and welcome to Science Sundays. It's a pleasure having all of you here today. Hope you enjoyed the weather today, and I hope you enjoy our Science Sundays lecture even more. This is a free public lecture series that's organized and sponsored by the Ohio State University's Arts and Sciences, as well as by eight sponsoring centers here at the university. The Science Sundays lectures present leading-edge research from speakers who cover really a very large diversity of different kinds of topics that are related to the sciences, art, and technology, and in ways that touch many of our everyday lives. Today's talk is sponsored by my institute. It's sponsored by the Decision Sciences Collaborative. My name is Ellen Peters, and I'm director of that collaborative. We are an interdisciplinary community of scholars and researchers really, who are focused on research, teaching, as well as promoting more effective evidence-based decision-making and solutions to critical societal problems. Dr. Jan Bach-Steffensmeyer, she is our Divisional Dean of Social and Behavioral Sciences. We've been fortunate enough to also have her sponsor the Decision Sciences Collaborative, and she will now introduce today's speaker.
Thanks, Ellen. I'm so happy to be here to welcome you. And last year, Ellen was the speaker for the Decision Sciences Collaborative and an accomplished scholar in her own right. She brings together people who study topics like prejudice, stereotypes, consumer choices, financial decision-making, decisions about one's health, political and legal decisions. So the Decision Sciences Collaborative, if you don't know much about it, please Google it, and you can Google Decision Sciences Snapshot and get a 2-page handout about all the wonderful things that are going on at her center. And I believe there's around 185 faculty who are associated with it. So it's a big, comprehensive center with a lot of strong scholars doing work there in the research realm, but also in teaching. It's my pleasure to introduce the speaker, Dr. Richard Petty. He received his political science and psychology undergraduate degree in 1973 from the University of Virginia, then came back to Ohio State to get his PhD in 1977. Then we were able to recruit him as a faculty about a decade later. We were very lucky to do so. And then about a decade after that, the Ohio State University awarded him our most distinguished professor award, which is the highest award Ohio State University gives, and it's bestowed by the Board of Trustees. He has a long list of government service that I thought you might be particularly interested in. So he has served at the National Institute of Health Drug Abuse, the National Institute of Cancer, the National Science Foundation, and the National Institute of Mental Health. If I went on with his honors, it would be a long list and would take us a while. So I'm just going to tell you a couple that show again the high caliber of the speaker that we have the pleasure to have here today. He is also a member of the National Academy of Arts and Sciences. And then finally, he is one of 100 most eminent psychologists ever. So Freud's on that list too. So without further ado, please welcome Dr. Richard Petty.
Thank you so much, Jan, for that wonderful introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much for coming out on this beautiful day. There are many other ways you could spend your time today. So thank you for being here. I'm going to try to turn this on. What I'm going to talk about today is some of the research we've been doing over the past decade or so on confidence. And before I can do that, we need to distinguish it from the thing in psychology with which it's most confused, and that is self-esteem. Everybody knows what self-esteem is, right? That's how much do you like yourself? So sometimes people confuse self-confidence with self-esteem. The way we think about it in psychology, if you think about any attitude object, here I have yourself there, but it could be Diet Coke, it could be ice cream, we can decide if we like it or dislike it. And so if we like ourselves, we have high self-esteem. If we think we're good people, if we don't like ourselves so much, we think we're bad, we have low self-esteem. Confidence refers to the sense that that particular judgment can be trusted, that that judgment is correct, or that judgment is accurate. And so somebody might think they're a good person, but if I ask them, are you sure you're a good person? I'll go, no, I'm not that sure. I'm not so sure I'm good. And I can have a person say, what do you like? And they go, well, I'm kind of dishonest. Not so good. Are you sure? Yeah, I'm totally sure that's what I'm like. I completely am certain that's who I am. And so you can see somebody can be very confident, and that's very different from what you think of yourself, right? Because confidence or certainty is always about something, some other judgment. And so we think of self-esteem as a primary cognition. It's the first thought we might have about something. I like ice cream, I like myself. Whereas confidence is a secondary cognition, or what's called a metacognition within psychology. A metacognition is a cognition about a cognition. Right? So I don't ask you about yourself, I ask you about good. Is good right or wrong as a descriptor of you? And if you say, yeah, it's accurate, that's a secondary thought about a thought you've already had. So we're going to talk about confidence as a particular kind of metacognition. Okay, well, there's a lot written about confidence, most of it not in psychology, most of it in the popular press. So you can buy a book called Extreme Confidence, or Extraordinary Confidence, Unstoppable Confidence, Instant Confidence if you can't wait to get it. And then my personal favorite is this one, Unbreakable, Unstoppable, Powerful Confidence in All Areas of Life. All right, so that covers everything you could possibly want. If you go to Amazon, there are tons of books about confidence. You can get the confidence to go mountain climbing. You could get the confidence of a Navy SEAL. You could have a plan. You can take the 21-day challenge to build your confidence over a period, just like you would do exercise. There are literally hundreds of these books about getting confidence, which suggests that people want it, whatever it is, and for whatever reason, that they seem to be really interested in obtaining it. We also see references to confidence in the popular culture. I'm sure a lot of you shop at Best Buy. How do you shop at Best Buy? Well, when you're at Best Buy, you want to buy that new television, but have confidence, right? You want it to be good, but that's not sufficient. You want to be sure that TV is going to be good and last. Target has the same slogan, as it turns out. I guess they didn't copyright it at Best Buy. They want you to shop with confidence. If you drive around campus, you'll see these trucks all over the place. They're responsible for the shredding of documents here. And at Ohio State, we shred with confidence. I just want you to know. In the labs, you want to clone with confidence. Thanksgiving's coming up. Got to carve that turkey with confidence. Here's a broad one, Transamerica. Live your whole life with confidence. All right, that's the best way to live your life. And when your life's over, go out with confidence, too. Small sample of the hundreds of ways that people are trying to use this whole idea of confidence, building on all those Amazon books. People seem to think, we want this. This is what we want. Why? Why is everybody so concerned with it? Why is it used in advertising so much? Why are there so many popular books about it? Well, did any of you see the movie Sully? Good movie, Tom Hanks, wonderful. The movie's about Captain Sully Sullenberger, who miraculously landed this plane under adverse conditions in the Hudson River. Heroic. He was asked, how in the world did you do it? His answer was, I was just sure I could. And he just had the confidence in his skills that he'd be able to do it. That's what allowed him to do it, that sense of certainty. Confidence is probably used nowhere more. First, it's the economy. We have confidence in our economy, so they survey that. But the second biggest area is in sports. 2 years ago, when Ohio State upset Oregon to win the national championship, of course, you know how the Buckeyes did it, right? Urban Meyer said they were just brimming with confidence, and that's how they were able to do it. I don't know where that confidence was yesterday, but at least 2 years ago, it was pretty good. Well, these are all anecdotes, right? The books don't talk about research. The advertisements I gave you are just examples. People are reflecting on why they did things. And so my talk, I'm going to talk just very briefly about whether some people are more confident than others. Then I'm going to talk about what most people care about it comes to confidence. They think confidence is going to be associated with being successful, right? Confident people get ahead in life. They get to do the things that they want, and that's why people want confidence. Very little research on that, but we'll talk about some. Then I'll talk about our theory of confidence to try to explain what confidence does in a psychological sense. And then I'll talk about some phenomena that our theory of confidence can explain, like why negative advertising is so popular. Okay, so that's our outline. So first, are some people more confident than others? Well, the title of this biography of George Bush, Dead Certain, and throughout the book it just talks about how George Bush was so confident of all of his decisions. He just knew what he just felt it in his gut that what he was doing was correct and right. I don't even need to say anything about this candidate, but exudes, right? Everything is good. I'm sure I can fix things. Oprah Winfrey wrote a book recently. She tells you what she knows for sure, because you don't want to just know what she knows. You want to know what she knows for sure. Not every politician is off the charts in confidence. When Barack Obama was interviewed shortly after he was elected, he said, "I'm never 100% sure of what my decisions are. I always have some doubt about this aspect or that aspect," which is the headline here because that's such a shocking statement for a politician to make, that you're just not 100% sure of every single possible thing that you do. On the other end of the scale, we have Mother Teresa, who in this article in Time magazine talks about how she just doubts everything, including her religion. She wasn't sure about that. She wasn't sure whether the good works she's doing are the right way to live her life. She's just consumed with doubt. So at least anecdotally, there's a lot of variation in how confident people are. So let's look at that question briefly and also look at some preliminary evidence about whether confidence is related to success. So a couple years ago, my colleagues and I got involved with Claire Shipman and Katty Kay, who wrote this book called The Confidence Code, big article in the Atlantic called The Confidence Gap, and what they were concerned about, the gap is between the confidence men have in their abilities, especially at work, and women have in their abilities, especially at work. And so their book is about that general difference and what they think it might mean. But they realized when they talked to people like me and other psychologists that there really wasn't a whole lot of research on this topic, other than anecdotes. And so in collaboration with them, they put together a website, and they wanted us to develop a survey so we could survey people across the US in terms of their confidence and see what it relates to in life. So we developed a quiz where people could go on, click to test their own confidence. We had about 200,000 people plus answer the questionnaire, so we have more data than you really know what to do with. But here's what we did, what the questions look like. And so first part of the quiz is just to ask them some seemingly innocuous attitude questions, like this one is, what's your attitude toward playing chess? Right? Is it favorable, unfavorable? What's your attitude toward ice cream? We would ask about a whole bunch of mundane things. But the critical thing is after each attitude question, we would ask, how certain are you of that attitude? And that's what we're really interested in, right? Some people like chess, some people don't, but how certain are they of that? We also had questions that were more knowledge-type questions, like what's the population of Columbus, Ohio, or how old was George Washington when he died, whereas the first ones are all about opinion, where there is no right or wrong answer, right? Whether you're certain or not in your attitude toward chess, no one can say you're wrong. But the population of Columbus, Ohio has an answer. George Washington died at a particular age. So you could be wrong about that, so we were interested in whether or not there were differences in how people responded in their certainty to factual versus non-factual questions, so we would ask about how confident they were in those things. We had some hypothetical things like, when do you think the United States will land someone on Mars? How certain are you of that? So on and so forth. What we do then is, across all of these disparate items, is just total up how confident you were across all these various things. And so as you imagine, you get a nice normal distribution. Some people are seemingly really high on everything. They're certain that they like ice cream. They're certain of their answer to when George Washington died, and so forth. Other people kind of doubt them. Most people are kind of in the middle. They're certain of some things, not so certain of other things. And then we just wanted to correlate it with a bunch of other things that we measured. So if you're interested in age, for example, confidence goes up as we get older till you reach about 55, and then it sort of continues. It doesn't really go down, but it doesn't keep going up. That's the peak of when people are confident. But let's look at income. One, not the only measure of success, but certainly one measure that people who are interested in confidence use as a measure of success. So let's just graph how confident you were across all these bizarre things that you wouldn't think. How would your confidence in ice cream, whether you like ice cream or not, relate to your income or all these other things? But look at the relationship. Nice, beautiful, steady relationship. The more confident you are, the more money, income you report having. Now, the more education you have, so on and so forth. Now, the people interested in confidence would, if you read all those books on confidence, what they want you to think is that if you can become confident, then you will be successful. All right, but social scientists know that that's just a correlational relationship. Two things are related to each other. One reason they could be related is that confidence produces success. But it could be that as you gain success or you gain income, you become more confident. In which case, making you more confident wouldn't do anything because it's the trailing indicator. It isn't what's producing the effects. Or it could be the more education you get, the more income you get, more success you have, and the more confidence you get. So there's some third variable that's responsible for the relationship. So it's only the first one that people interested in confidence want to be the case, right? Because that's why you'd want to gain confidence so that you could gain some success. And so, as I said, correlation is not causation. And so what you need to do to figure out if confidence does something is to manipulate confidence. Make some people confident, make some people doubtful, and then see what happens. Now, if we could do it, you would intervene with kids early on, you track them throughout their careers and see if the confident ones became more successful than the non-confident ones. First of all, you can't do that. It'd be unethical to do so. Wouldn't want to do that because you're predicting some bad effects. But in the laboratory, what we can do is make people momentarily feel confident or momentarily feel doubtful, and we can see what those feelings of confidence or doubt do at the time. Okay? So what does confidence do? First, to understand what confidence does, let's just look at how psychologists think about getting to behavior. So to get to behavior, over here on the right, you can start with some thoughts and feelings that we have. We all have various thoughts during the day, various feelings, and those thoughts and feelings get translated into judgments and decisions in some way, shape, or form. Okay? Start with the thoughts, feelings, they turn to judgments, decisions, and then once we've made a decision, those decisions can get translated into behavior. They don't always. Right? We can make decisions that we never act on. And so you might think ice cream's tasty, it makes me happy, and so you decide the judgment is I like ice cream based on those, or a decision might be I should buy some ice cream. That's the decision I've made. The behavior is, do I actually spend my money to go buy some ice cream? So you can see there's a little causal chain from the first to the end. Now, what is our theory of confidence? Confidence, we propose, is what allows people to translate those thoughts and feelings into judgments and decisions. So if you have a bunch of thoughts, but you don't feel confident about them, you're not going to make a decision based on them. And if you have made a decision, I should buy some ice cream. If you're not confident in that decision, you're not actually going to go to the store and buy the ice cream. Okay, so confidence is that magic that makes this whole thing work or not work on the other end. If you doubt your thoughts, then you're not going to make decisions based on them. And if you doubt your decisions, you're not going to act on them either. Right? So there's something else missing from this classic model of thoughts to behaviors. So let's just start with the first question. Is this theory true? Is it true that when you make people confident, they're more likely to use their thoughts and feelings to make judgments and decisions? Till we started to look at this, no one had asked that question before. So let's just take a little example. Here's somebody who has, this just represents somebody who has a bunch of positive thoughts. So this might be ice cream. I have to say all of my thoughts about ice cream tend to be positive. And if somehow you made me confident, what confidence is going to do is magnify those positive thoughts. I'm really going to use those thoughts. I'm going to really rely on them because they're really looming larger for me because I'm sure of them. Negative thoughts could magnify those too. Okay? Now, here's our imaginary experiment, and then we'll turn it into a real experiment and show you what our data look like. So imagine we have people generating either positive thoughts or negative thoughts about something. Could be themselves, could be Diet Coke, could be ice cream. And then we're either going to do nothing, they just have their positive or negative thoughts, or we're going to do something to make them feel confident or doubtful. Okay, so they have their thoughts, do nothing, make them feel confident or doubtful. And then we're going to measure their decision or judgment of whatever it is, Diet Coke or themselves or ice cream. So what are we expecting to happen? So if I just got you to generate 3 positive thoughts about ice cream, and I ask you, well, how do you like ice cream? You're most likely going to say, well, I like it. So I'm graphing how much you like ice cream. So pretty good liking. If I just told you to generate 3 negative thoughts about ice cream, it'd be hard for me, but I'd say, well, it has a lot of calories, and maybe it's not best for my diet. So I could do it. I could come up with them. And if you ask me, what do you think of ice cream, right after I've done that, I'm not going to like ice cream as much. Okay, so nothing surprising about that. That's the normal thing that happens. If you have positive thoughts about something, you like it. If you have negative thoughts salient, then you don't like it. So so that's been, obviously, it's obvious and known for a long time. So the new thing is, what happens if after you have those thoughts, I do something to make you confident? And I'll talk about how we do that in a second. But the prediction is, I'm going to have a nice big impact on your judgment. If you had positive thoughts, I'm even going to be more favorable toward ice cream. And if I had negative thoughts, I'm even going to be more negative. And that case is particularly interesting because confidence is thought of as a positive thing, but here it's making me more negative about ice cream because now I'm going to feel confident that those negative things are right, and so I should use them and rely on them. If I make you feel doubtful, just the opposite. Even though I had 3 positive or 3 negative thoughts, I'm not going to use them because I don't trust. I don't trust the positive ones. I don't trust the negative ones, so I'm not going to rely on them. So in most of the studies, we're just going to have the high confidence and the low confidence group, and what we're going to be looking for is how the positive thing gets even more positive and the negative thing gets even more negative when you're confident as compared to doubtful. Okay, straightforward paradigm. So in experimental research, we call this a 2-by-2 design. We have 2 things that we're manipulating, whether the thoughts are positive or negative, and whether you are subsequently feeling confident or doubtful. Now, because people differ in how confident they normally are, in an experiment, it's very important that we randomly assign people to feel confidence or doubt. And by randomly assign, if you're not familiar with that, it just means our first subject comes in, turns out to be Sarah Palin. She's going to be in our study. And she has a certain level of confidence. It's actually quite high. But we're going to flip a coin and randomly assign her to be in our confident group or our doubtful group. So we flip the coin, and lo and behold, turns out she's going to be in our doubtful group. So she's the first person assigned. Our second subject, who is that? Looks like Clint Eastwood. Flip the coin. Oh, he goes into our confident group. Who do we have next? Looks like Tom Selleck. Where's he going to go? We don't know. We're going to flip a coin. It's all at random. He ends up in the confident group up there with Clint. Rush Limbaugh. He's going to end up in our doubtful group. All right, he won't like it, but that's the group he's going to be in. So we keep doing this until we get... he left our group. That was not good. Okay, so we just keep doing it till we get a bunch of people, 50 people, let's say, in each of our groups, the confident group and the doubtful group. Okay, now we need to further assign them to be generating positive thoughts or negative thoughts. So we'll do the same kind of thing. They're in the confident or doubtful group, and then we'll flip another coin, and they're going to be assigned to generate positive or negative thoughts. And now we'll maybe end up having 50 people in all groups. And the beauty of random assignment, it means that some people are naturally more confident, and some people are more knowledgeable, and there are all sorts of ways in which people differ, all those individual differences. But because we've randomly assigned them to it, we know that we've held all those differences pretty much constant if our sample is large enough. So we can see what's the impact of what we're doing, the positive, negative thoughts, and the confidence. So let me tell you about the very first study that we did, where we tried to manipulate confidence and see what impact it had on people's judgments. So this was a study we did here at Ohio State using undergraduates. So first thing they're going to do is we're going to try to get them to generate positive or negative thoughts about something. The topic in the study was requiring seniors, college seniors, to take an exam before they could graduate in their major, something they don't like. And to get them to think positive or negative thoughts, we either give them very strong arguments for it that we've pre-tested or weak arguments. And then, so that's easy. That's the easy part, right? Get them to generate positive or negative thoughts. But now, here's the new part. We want them, some of them, to feel really confident momentarily, and some of them to feel doubtful. So what we did was we asked them to describe for us, to write down, some personal experiences in which they were very confident. At least 3. They had to write at least 3 experiences where they were confident. Or they would write down at least 3 experiences in which they felt doubtful. And the idea is, if you're writing about 3 times you were confident, you'll start to feel confident. And if you write about 3 times where you were doubtful, you'd start to feel doubtful. And then we're going to measure their attitude toward these exams. Okay, just to show you, I'll go through this study in a little more detail than the others, just to give you a sense of how we do it. So in the case where we want them to have positive thoughts, we gave them good arguments for these exams. We said it would help Ohio State to be more excellent. It would help them get admitted to graduate and professional schools. They would have higher starting salaries if they could prove it. All sorts of stuff that the students go, wow, this is great, I like it. Right? They want them. Or we gave them very weak arguments. We'd take part in a trend. Graduate students have to take them, so you better have to do it also. We'd get enough anxiety to make you study more and stuff like that. And they go, I don't think I want that. That's not for me. So they're generating a bunch of, and parents, unfortunately, if you're parents, that wasn't a good argument for them, that your parents want you to do it. Okay, so you can imagine how most of the students would be writing mostly positive things in one case or negative things in the other. Okay, to give you an example of the kinds of confidence experiences they wrote about, what do undergraduates write when you tell them, give us some examples of when you were confident? They say things like, in math class I solved a difficult problem and explained it to my group. Good, that's a confidence inducer. When I share ideas with friends and they reassure me. When I worked at a movie theater and got promoted. Getting that guy that everyone wants, but only I can have him. So all of these, some academic, some work-related, some social, right? But no trouble students having coming up with these kinds of things. And after they do it, they're feeling confident. In the doubt group, we have things like this. When I haven't really studied and I tend to make up something. When I fell asleep in class and woke up and the teacher was talking about something I had no idea about. That happens, unfortunately, more than you care to think. I was at a party checking a guy out. He was flirting, but I had my doubts because I thought he might be from Michigan. Right. Nothing causes more doubts than end up dating somebody from Michigan. When I was in a fight and I was bleeding and it wouldn't stop. Well, that one's kind of scary too, but lots of doubts. Okay, so no trouble. And then, so they write their positive and negative thoughts. We make them feel confident or doubtful. And then they tell us, okay, now, what do you actually think about these exams? Do you think they're good or bad? So here's a person who goes through and fills it out, and they're pretty negative toward the exams. And we just take an average after reverse scoring for the ones that are worded in the opposite direction. Okay, so that's our measure of their evaluation or their judgment about, what's your judgment of senior comprehensive exams? Okay, so remember, we have these 4 groups of people to which they've been randomly assigned. They have no choice as to which group they are in. So the first thing we want to be sure of, and I'm going to tell you about this for this study, not for the others, but first thing we want to make sure is that the people in the positive group actually had positive thoughts, and it doesn't differ depending on whether they were in the confidence or doubt group. And so when they got the strong arguments, about 71% of the thoughts that they generated were positive, as we intended. Okay? And when they got weak arguments, about only 39% were positive, meaning the majority of the thoughts were negative toward the exams. Okay, so we have our 2 groups, one mostly positive in their thoughts, one mostly negative. So the key question is, how did they evaluate the exams? And so let's look at the strong arguments case first, where the thoughts were favorable. And here we can see the group that was made to feel confident right after they wrote those positive thoughts show that increase. They're even more positive about the exams than the ones who don't feel confident. For the weak arguments, it's just the reverse. So there's that nice confidence as a magnifier effect. Right? In fact, look, the people who were low in confidence, who wrote those doubt experiences, it didn't matter whether they got the good arguments or those weak arguments. They have exactly the same sort of middling opinion of these exams. We're not influenced by the positive and negative thoughts that they wrote. Okay, so our first study in the literature that shows that confidence actually does something, right? Not who's confident or not, but you can actually make people confident and make them behave differently, more reliant on whatever they're thinking. Okay, now I'm going to go through a number of studies pretty quickly so I can get to the second half of the talk. And so in the first study, the manipulation of confidence was pretty blatant, pretty obvious. And so when people in the field read this, they said, well, would more subtle kinds of things work as well, where you don't hit people over the head? And comprehensive exams is something no one's ever heard of. Would this work with something people really care about, like who do you care about more but yourself? Would it work if the attitude object was yourself or somebody you know? And so the second study deals with this. And so we used a much more subtle induction of confidence here. And the induction was, with which hand do you write your thoughts? Okay, so if you are right-handed and you wrote this word plumie, it would look pretty nice. If you wrote it with your left hand, it would look more like what's on the right part of the screen, kind of shaky. You might induce feelings of some doubt, uncertainty. It's unnerving. All right, it doesn't look right. And so if it doesn't look right, maybe it actually is wrong. So this study is going to be the same as before. Conceptually, people are going to generate 3 positive or 3 negative thoughts, but this time they're writing thoughts about themselves. Tell me 3 of your good qualities. Tell me 3 of your bad qualities. And we tell them, because this is a study on graphology, we want you to write those thoughts either with your right hand or your left hand. And so that's the only difference, what they write their thoughts with. And then we measure their self-esteem. Okay, so a very consequential outcome. So here's just, again, an example of someone who wrote with their dominant hand, sometimes I am lazy. Okay, it's written with the dominant hand. It looks like it normally looks when you write stuff, and so people presumably will believe that. That seems accurate. I generated it, I wrote it, it's true. But when they write with their left hand, I am smart. No, doesn't look right. And the important thing is, even if they had written, and in some cases they do, I'm lazy, that doesn't look right either. So it's not that they're just discounting the good stuff. They're going to discount the bad stuff too, because it just doesn't look right, it doesn't feel right. I have some uncertainty about it, I have some doubt. Okay, and then the results, same thing, self-esteem. When you wrote positive things with your right hand, those who wrote positive and negative things with their left hand, they're just not using those thoughts at all, having no impact on their judgments. Okay, other things, if while you're listening to something, you're nodding your head like this, or if you're thinking, if I say, think about how good you are, and you go, I'm good, I'm smart, I'm fantastic. right? It feels right when you do it that way. This is when you can feel. Whereas if I have you do this, I'm excellent. I'm wonderful, right? You're negating what you're thinking, right? So we won't go into details of the study, but all I need to do is show you that manipulation, when you were nodding your head and having those positive thoughts, you really believed what you were thinking. You were certain, you're also more confident in what you were thinking. But when it's negative, even though you're more confident in what you're thinking, of course, you're going to have lower self-esteem because now you believe those negative thoughts. Okay, I think I have one more. Sit up straight, that's confident. Slump over, not so confident. So if you do that, I won't go into the details. Again, same thing, right? So just want to show you, however we try to manipulate this feeling of confidence through direct experience of what happened to you in the past, a more subtle thing like nodding your head, the same result occurs. You use your thoughts more, magnification of your thoughts. And so we said experiences of confidence, writing with your hand, nodding your head, whether you're sitting up straight, other things that I'm not telling you about, all have this effect of making you translate those thoughts into a judgment or a decision. Okay, let's turn to the second half of this now. So we've turned our thoughts when we're feeling confident into a decision or judgment. But what we ultimately really care about is behavior, right? Do those decisions get translated into any kind of action of any sort? And so I want to turn to that question next and talk about what particular phenomena we have explained with confidence. Okay, first, we all know that powerful people get into trouble, right? It goes across political party, it goes from CEOs of companies to politicians. There's no shortage of examples that I could put up here. But why? Why does that happen? Well, the classic explanation, going back to Sir Ferdinand, is this. You've seen this quote before, right? Power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Great men are almost always bad men. I'm sure Ferdinand would apply it to women too today. Power is the cause. It corrupts you. It makes you become bad, is basically what that's saying. There's something about being powerful that makes you bad, right? So feeling powerful leads to more bad thoughts. I never thought of harassing anybody before, but now that I'm powerful, that thought pops into my head. Right? That's the idea of power corrupting. Well, you might imagine our point of view is going to be a little different. Right? We're going to say, no, power, if you're this person and you become powerful, it isn't that bad thoughts just start popping into your head. What happens when you become powerful is you start to feel confident. You start to feel sure. That's what power is doing. It's making you feel like, I'm just right about everything. So if a bad thought pops into your head, you'll think that's right, and you'll maybe act on it. But if a good thought pops into your head, then you're more likely to do that too. So powerful people can do more good things too when good things pop into their heads. So our proposal is that powerful people are more likely to follow their thoughts, whether they're good or bad. It's just a magnifier, like we saw before. Okay? So they're more likely to engage in both good and bad behavior. So that's never been tested before, so we decided to do the first study to look at that. So here, again, following our standard procedure, in this case, we had undergraduates read a message about a new cell phone or a new health plan. There are different messages they read about, and they're asked to either generate positive or negative thoughts in some studies, or some studies they get strong and weak arguments like I showed you before, so we do this in a variety of different ways. I'm just going to, in the interest of time, collapse across all of them. And then here's the new thing. Now, instead of making them feel confident, we're going to make them feel powerful. And so in some studies, They go through this little scenario where one person gets to play the boss and make all the decisions, and the employee has to just listen to them. And so you're in the low power role, so you get a little experience of being powerless or powerful. In other studies, they write about a time when they had power over others or when others had power over them. And so both of those things momentarily make people feel powerful or powerless. Okay, and look what power does. Makes them rely on their positive thoughts more, makes them rely on their negative thoughts more. Power leads to confidence, leads to reliance on thoughts. Okay, well, that's a judgment effect. No behavior yet. So the study I want to tell you about in some detail is behavior. So what we really want to see, the critical test of this idea, is to see whether we can get both more good and more bad behavior from powerful people, or whether powerful people are just going to be more bad, which is what the power corrupts theory says. So here we have some undergraduates. And so the first part of this study is we need to activate some mental content in their heads. And so one way of doing this is by a technique called priming. Priming is where I say one thing and it activates something else in your mind. So for example, if I said doctor, you would all think nurse or hospital or something associated with it, right? And so I primed, even though I didn't say nurse, I made you think a nurse or hospital. So in this case, they're going to be primed with things that might make them, sort of put them in a competitive mindset, which is normally what you think a powerful person does. So that's sort of the normal connection. They're going to compete with you, try to dominate you, win over you. And so the competitive mindset people had to unscramble various words, not unscramble, but fill in letters of words like victory and battle. They did 10 of those. Right? Those are kind of competitive words, victory, domination, things like that. Or they did words like support and help, which are more cooperative words. And so they had 10 of those, either competitive or cooperative words, and there were 22 filler ones. So these are kind of embedded in a longer list of words, so they're not so obvious, and a table would be an example of a filler word. Okay, so we activate a mindset of competition or a mindset of cooperation, and then we do the same thing before, either put them in the boss or employee role or a high or low power situation. And so the measure here is how much money they give to their partner. So actual parting with cash. In a game often used in behavioral economic studies called the trust game. So here's our modification of the trust game. So imagine you're playing this game. You're told you're going to get $10. Here you go. Here's your $10. Great, I have $10 that I didn't have before I came into the study. What am I supposed to do with this $10? Well, here's what you can do. You can give all of this money or some part of this money to your partner. And whatever you give to your partner is going to be tripled. So if you decide you want to give $10 to your partner is actually going to get $30. You'll have nothing at the moment, right? If you give all 10 to your partner, they're getting 30, you have nothing. If you give $1 to your partner, they get $3, and you keep 9. So they'd have 3, you'd have 9. Anything in between. Now, why would you give money to your partner? Well, because once the partner gets the money, they have a chance to give you some back. Right? So if you're thinking about this through and you're very cooperative and you think the world's a great cooperative place, I would take all 10 of my dollars, I'd give it to my partner, they'd get 30, and then I'd hope they'd maybe give me half back and I'd get 15. That would maximize my outcome. Right? If I don't trust my partner, I'm not going to give them anything. If I trust them a little, I'll give them a little. Right? So the measure of how much money you give is, in essence, how much do I want to cooperate with this other person? Or how much do I want to compete? The safest thing, of course, is just to keep it all. The most risky but potentially rewarding thing is to cooperate and give them more money. Of course, most people do something right in between. But let's see what happens. Okay, remember the design is the classic 2x2. They've been primed with this cooperation mindset or competition, and then they're made to have high or low power. And the only question is, how much money do they give to their partner? In the competitive mindset, the high-power people keep more for themselves than the people who are primed with cooperation. That's the normal effect people would say should happen from power. High power makes you selfish, bad thoughts, keep the money for yourself. And so the real test is that still going to be true if you're primed with cooperation? Because if power just makes you think bad thoughts, you're going to still do it there, but no, it doesn't. Right? Just the opposite. Look how relatively generous the powerful people are now. Because now they're sure their partner's going to cooperate. Right? That thought may be right or wrong, doesn't matter. What matters is that they're sure that thought that they have, those thoughts about cooperation, are going to be correct, and so they act on them, spend their money to do that. So, power corrupts? Don't think so. Power produces confidence that can make you be good or bad, depending on what's in your head. So we just need to, if you want powerful people to be good, you just got to keep feeding them good stuff. So that's what's in their head, and then they'll say, oh, that's right, that's sure, and I'm going to act on it. Right? So whoever their advisors are, I guess, become absolutely critical because they're feeling powerful and they'll go with what they're thinking. Now after we did this research, and if you read the literature on power, there is another theory of power that I haven't mentioned yet that came after the power corrupts theory. And that's that what power does is it makes people action-oriented. It makes them want to do stuff. Okay, so you might have heard that theory before. Powerful people are doers. They're not thinkers. They're doers. They do stuff, right? And so one of the classic studies used to support this theory was done by Galinsky and colleagues, where they activated people to feel powerful or not powerful, either by being the boss or employee, or think about a time when you were powerful or not. And then after they've done that, they go into a room where they're going to complete the second part of the study. In the room, there's this fan on the table, and it's blowing papers all over the place. Right? So what would you do if you're in this room and this fan's blowing papers all over the place? Well, the thought everyone has is, I want to shut that fan off. Everyone has that thought, but who actually does it? The people who are powerful, or made to feel powerful, shut it off 69% of the time. The low power people only do it 42% of the time. Okay? That's the power makes you take action. Now, surprisingly, it's not 100% because you have thoughts. Maybe you have the thought, well, maybe that's not the right thing to do. Maybe it's on for a reason, but they acted, did something. Okay, so I'm going to tell you about one study that we did to try to tease apart this action orientation theory from the confidence interpretation of power. And so it goes a little like this. Let's say you're the boss of a company and you have a bunch of negative thoughts about your employee. And because you're the boss, our theory says those thoughts are going to become magnified. And so you're really going to think this person's negative and you're going to have to do something about it. You're going to act on those negative thoughts, so you might want to fire that person. Okay, so powerful people would make a firing or termination decision faster than powerless people. So we predict that from confidence. The action orientation people predict that from their action orientation. You're going to do something, fire them. If the employee is good, again, we both make the same prediction. You're going to want to hire this person or promote this person because you have these magnified positive thoughts, and the action orientation theory says that too. Yeah, you're going to do something fast. You're going to hire them or promote them. Okay, here's where the theories make different predictions. What if, instead of having all positive or all negative thoughts about something, you have a mixture of thoughts? So all the studies on action orientation are always done in cases where there's a dominant thought, positive or negative, or turn off the fan. Now here, the power theory says, oh, you're going to magnify all of those thoughts, the positive and the negative. And so what happens if the positive things are right? Oh, but wait a minute, the negative things are right. It's all right. What's going to happen? You're going to become frozen in conflict because both sides are totally right. Right? Because now the conflict is being magnified. And so the powerful people are going to feel more ambivalent, conflicted. And so even though the action theory says if you have to decide to promote or fire the person, you're still going to make one of those decisions fast. Maybe you'll just go with your first gut reaction, just do it. And we're going to say, no, here's one case where powerful people are actually going to be slower than powerless people. Okay, so very quickly, to do the study, it's very simple. We give people 10 positive behaviors about an employee, 10 negative behaviors, or a mixture, 5 and 5. And then we do the power induction, and we look at their decision time. Okay, I won't go through the details of that in the interest of time, but again, the predictions are they always going to be faster, or are they only going to be faster when there's a univalent rather than a mixed response? So here's what the data look like. Let's look at when the employee was all good or all bad. Here we see what the action theory predicts as well as our confidence theory. The powerful people, this is how quickly they made a decision, so low numbers are faster to make decisions. So the powerful people made that decision to promote or fire or whatever their decision was faster than the people who weren't feeling powerful. But look what happens when there's two sides. Now the powerful people are being slower. And so for that reason, we favor the power leads to confidence theory over power is either a bad person or power leads to just quick action. Okay, I just said that. Now, second example that I said I would get to if we had some time. And so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. We've seen plenty of negative ads, right, about both candidates this time. This happens every election cycle. This time is particularly bad, but it does happen every election cycle. So why is there so much negative advertising? Any issue can be thought of as something you support or oppose. So do you support equality? Sure we do. Do you oppose discrimination? Sure. The proposition, though, is I think one of those is a more powerful thing than the other. Because one is something good. You support equality. One is, I got to stop this bad thing. And so if you think about it just quickly, if I said something good's about to happen, you'd go, oh, good, what is it? What's going to happen? If I said something bad is just about to happen, some of you would immediately get up, start going to the door. You'd be like, what do I have to do? You start to think in a very different way about stopping that bad thing from happening. And so I apologize for going through this, but let's say we have a Republican voter. Let's divide them into two kinds. You're a Republican voter because you support Trump, or you're a Republican voter because you oppose Clinton, right? Or you could be Democratic voter because you support Clinton, or you oppose Trump, right? And if I just went and asked people in this room, you would put yourself into those categories, right? Some of you are doing it, you're going to vote out of hatred for the other candidate. Some of you are going to doing it out of like for your candidate, right? So the world could be divided into those. And if I wanted to study that, I could just ask people, which category do you fall in? Are you a supporter of Hillary or an opponent of Trump, or where do you fall? But if I did that and just asked you where you fell, I would have the same problem that we talked about before with people being different on other dimensions. And so maybe all the opposers have more knowledge than the supporters, or maybe the opposers are more emotional than the supporters. And so if I can't just ask you, I have to put you into one of those groups by random assignment. Right? So how do I put you into one of those groups by random assignment? Well, we're going to do it by calling you on the phone and asking you a simple question. So if you're a Democratic voter, I might ask you in some conditions by random assignment, what do you think about electing Clinton? And if you're a Democratic voter, you're going to say, I support Clinton. That's what I think about Clinton. I support her. Or I could ask a Democratic voter, what do you think about electing Trump? Now you're going to say, oh, I oppose him. I'm against him. Right? So by the question I ask you, by random assignment, I at least momentarily make you think of yourself as a supporter or an opposer. Same thing with Republicans. What do you think about electing Trump? What do you think about electing Clinton? Okay, so we did this study in the context of an actual gubernatorial elections in New Jersey and Virginia. So shortly before the election. registered voters are called and they're asked one of the two questions. What do you think about electing the Democrat? What do you think about electing the Republican? And so they either say support or oppose, and again, this is by random assignment. Then we measure their attitudes toward the candidate and certainty. So what we ask them doesn't change how much they like their candidate, and it shouldn't. Right? They like their candidate equally, regardless of what question we ask them. But then we ask them, right after we said, how much do you like your candidate? How sure are you of that response you gave us? And you can see the people who just momentarily thought of themselves as favoring their candidate because they opposed the other person were more certain of that judgment. Right? They're more confident now. That's important because confident people act on their attitudes. So then we ask them, how likely are you to vote? How likely are you to donate money? How likely are you to volunteer? And the ones who got the opposition framing said they were more likely to do all of those things, acting on their attitude. So negative advertising, even though it doesn't change how much you like the candidate, and so that's what some people focus on, like, oh, it doesn't really do anything because you like the candidates equally well. It didn't change that. And that's right. It doesn't change how much you like your candidate. But it does something else that's in some ways even more critical. It makes you confident that you got to stop that person, whoever it is that you want to stop. And you're more likely to go to stop the hurricane from coming, right, than the cool, breezy winds. You don't have to do anything. When something good's going to happen, you don't have to do anything. Okay. I'll end with this one, because I don't have a study. This is more just a thought experiment. So there's been a lot of attention in the news recently about the gender pay gap, fewer women CEOs of companies, and all sorts of various positions like that. Why is that? This is a big, and people have lots of explanations for it. And there's some academic research on it. And there are things that academics have discovered, like even when men and women do equally well on a science test, they performed exactly the same. The women are less sure they did well than the men. All right, so the confidence gap. Why does that matter? Well, here's the problem. Women earn less than men, even in the same job with the same skills, same ratings, fewer women in the highest positions. This is especially true in science and technology companies. And so some people have tried to explain this, social scientists. So these are two business school professors who say, the problem is women just don't ask to be promoted, right? Or at least that's one of the issues. And so they did a study with students at Carnegie Mellon Business School, and they found that these are very elite women at a very elite school. And they found that the men initiated salary negotiations, went into the boss and said, hey, let's talk about my salary, 4 times as often as women did, 4 times more frequently. And even if you just looked at cases where they both went in to ask, the men asked for 30% more money, right, than the women did. Well, if you're trying to predict, well, what's at least one reason why men and women get paid differently, and it's not because of skill and talent, right? So you control for that. There has to be something else going on. And so our hypothesis is there's something like this, right? And this is also what is proposed in this book based on the research that we have done. So men and women have the same thought. I'm a good employee. In fact, I might think I'm a great employee. That's a thought. What do you do with that thought? Male, because they're more sure of that thought. Again, just having the thought that I'm a good employee, which is where most of the attention is focused, build your belief that you're good. No, that's good. You want to do that. Not to say you shouldn't do that. But doing that's not enough, because you have to be sure of that judgment. And so translate it into, I deserve a promotion. I deserve a raise. That's what the confidence is going to do. But let's say we get to that. I deserve a promotion. I deserve a raise. And so we equate men and women. Now we have this last step in the thing. I have to ask for the promotion or raise. And unless I'm sure that's the right decision, I really am confident I deserve, it's just not a thought. I'm sure it's the right thought. it's not going to be translated into. And so this idea of asking discrepancy is out there, but not explained by this confidence difference. Okay, road rage, anger. Anger leads to more negative thoughts. It does, but the more important thing about anger is anger makes you feel confident. When you're angry, you are sure. Fear makes you doubtful. Anger makes you confident. So if you have negative thoughts when you are angry, they're going to get translated into aggression. And so just to give you an example of lots of things, confidence is not self-esteem. Confidence comes from many places. But the most important thing is confidence is going to magnify the good and the bad and translate those decisions into action. And so with that, I want to thank all my colleagues who collaborated on this research, very important, and I want to thank you and Science Sundays for sponsoring this. So we can take questions, or if some people have to leave, but if not, I'm more than happy to.
Is it confidence associated with fear?
Confidence is not associated. Oh, sorry. The question is confidence associated with fear? And confidence is not associated with fear. And so imagine with fear, what you get is that classic fight or flight response. Right? Something's coming at me. Do I fight it or do I flee? And so you can see how all of a sudden it's like, I don't know what the right thing is. Once I've decided what to do, then you might have confidence to engage in that action. But the initial fear about something leads to doubt and uncertainty about what to do. Whereas anger is very confidence-inducing. Happiness is very confidence-inducing too. Sadness is more a doubt emotion. So the different emotions line up differently on those appraisals. Are there physical reasons why men might be more confident than women? One might imagine in certain domains that are related to physicality, there could be some differences, but most of the research in psychology shows that the confidence of women versus men tend to follow cultural stereotypes. Right? So, for example, in some domains, women have more confidence in their academic abilities than men, in verbal skills and writing and so forth. But in science and technology, the cultural stereotype is that women are not as capable as men. Even though it's not true, that's the cultural stereotype, and women will buy into that cultural stereotype too. And so that's why when they perform the same, there's studies like this, they performed exactly the same on a test, women will predict, if they did well, they'll think, oh, I probably got a B, B minus, and then go, I got an A, from the same thought, exactly the same performance. And then, if you think you got an A, there's research also goes on to show that if you think you did well, and I ask you, do you want to have a science career? Do you want to take part in something? Men are more likely to say yes. Women, because they kind of think they did well, but they don't have that assurance, because in part, doing well conflicts with societal expectations, and so that's where some of the doubt comes from. Then I'm less likely to decide, well, I should do that as a major, because you always feel like, well, maybe I didn't do well. So these doubts then end up determining the choices that you make.
In keeping with his question, doesn't that go right back to traditional hunter-gatherer roles all the way back to the caveman days?
Well, because does the differential confidence go back to the hunter-gatherer days? Certainly a lot of things go back to the hunter-gatherer days, but because this confidence is contingent on societal expectations. And there are, for example, cultural stereotype is women are better at childcare, right, than men. So there's a case where, and it turns out women's confidence is higher in that domain than men's. They're more likely to volunteer and act on. So even if a man, and here's a case where even if a man has the same thought, I did a pretty good job changing the diaper this morning, whatever. But if you ask, well, how sure are you it was done right? It's like, I don't know. Just not so sure that it was right. Even if you go in and say, actually, it was done perfectly acceptably, right? Because it conflicts with expectations of how I'm supposed to be. And so in our own research, we don't find a general difference in confidence between men and women across, so in that sample of 200,000 people, there wasn't a general, so men weren't more confident in that they liked ice cream than were women. right? There's no overall difference. But in certain domains, like science and technology is a good example, that's wherever the difference exists, that's where it's potentially going to have this problem. And so it's especially horrible if it exists in a domain where there's no basis for why you should feel differential confidence. Right. If there is a basis, you could say, well, maybe there's some rationality, it fits, it's good. If I'm not a good singer and I decide to audition for American Idol and embarrass myself, it might have been better for me to have low confidence in my ability to stop me from doing it. Right. So I'm not saying we want to just increase. So again, the lesson of this is confidence isn't always good. Right. Confidence is a magnifier. So you're still who you are with whatever thoughts you have, and that confidence is just going to make you more like that, whichever it is, or act more like that, whatever is in your head.
So low self-esteem creates low confidence.
No. Does low self-esteem create low confidence? So low self-esteem and low confidence tend to go together. They can go together, and so some people are high in both, some are low in both. But there are enough differences that there are people who are low in self-esteem and they're sure. And you can imagine this is a recipe for some really bad behavior like suicides. That if you are low in self-esteem and high in confidence, that's not good, right? So there's a case where the two don't go together and it's a problem. Right, so you either need to fix the self-esteem, or you need to reduce the confidence. You're not right. That's right. Yeah, you're lazy sometimes, but it's just sometimes. You shouldn't be sure that you're a lazy person. Right? You should have some doubt about that, because I can give you 3 examples of where you're industrious. Yes.
I have a question that can you tell like the sample sizes in all of these experiments were about where, and how were about the outliers, the extreme cases that were the so-called exceptions to the rules?
Okay, the first question was, what were the sample sizes in the studies? Is that the question? In general? So at a minimum, in the laboratory studies, there's always at least 25 people per condition. In the national samples, there were several hundred, and so there were 200 or 300 in each group. So they're not huge samples, but you use statistical procedures to decide if the results are trusted or not. But for most of our research, the reason I trust them is not because of any one study. So typically, if we have a finding, then we repeat it with different methods, with different samples, and we repeat it again using different manipulations, then we repeat it again, and then it's the pattern across all of the different studies. It gives you the confidence that the results are what you would expect. There are a few studies in which there are outliers. Most of the time in the studies, the responses are constrained because they're responding on a 1 to 9 scale, and so there aren't really outliers. The one exception to that would be things like where you're looking at reaction time, right? So how fast you make a decision. Imagine there's somebody in the experiment who kind of daydreams, and instead of responding under 5 seconds, which is what most people are doing, they respond in 2 minutes. Right, so we do remove the ones who are, really extreme outliers, but it's only certain measures that applies to.
Have you noticed any differential change with age? The confidence difference. Have you noticed anything?
Have we noticed any change with age? So a great question is I think I mentioned overall confidence goes up to about age 55. All right, so you keep gaining confidence from the youngest person in our 200,000 sample study claimed to be 12 years old. And so with 200,000, you get all sorts of ages of people who do it. And so there's a pretty nice, and with 200,000, you get a nice smooth data. It's great. And so it rises pretty steadily till about age 55, and then it tapers off. An interesting question is why? Right, why 55? So some might have hypothesized, maybe when you leave the workforce, there's something about that. Some might say it correlates with your peak earnings, and so that might be a factor in it. Is that addressing your question, or you're more interested in whether some of these other...
But also the differential, the range of how much that can be swayed through the experiment?
In many of the studies, these are college students where you can sway their confidence pretty easily, and some might say yes, college students are malleable. And so in the one study on the election, however, that's a random sample of people in the electorate, right? And the only thing that was different in the high and low confidence group was whether we said, do you support or do you favor this candidate or that candidate? And that little wording thing was sufficient to produce differences in confidence between the groups that were comparable to what we do with the head nodding and head shaking and the things we do in the lab. And so that suggests to me the general public electorate is as malleable, at least momentarily. Now, we haven't produced changes in confidence that are going to last, days and days and days, but enough to make them decide, I feel confident right now, and so I'm going to sign up for helping this candidate. So that's the one thing. Haven't looked at populations, isolated, older people, middle-aged people, and so forth, but at least that's a representative sample of the electorate, and the same kinds of effects hold. Thank you.